10 minutes late, but that's another story. Thank you very much for joining us here at Carlton Live. Well, first of all, I better introduce my fantastic co-hosts here. And tonight we have, as always, the eloquent John Rowe. Good evening, John. How are you?
Yeah, fantastic, mate. I'm looking forward to tonight. It's Wow Jones actually recommended we get Dan on the show, and it was a wonderful idea. He's got a fantastic history with his writing. One of the premier authors of our sport in the world, and we look forward to talking to him. But it's also when someone 6'8" and 2 axe handles across the shoulders suggests something, you kind of do it.
Yeah, you do. And we also have the pleasure of the Carlton Encyclopedia Britannica himself, Andrew Lake. Andrew, looking very sharp this evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Trevor. I'm looking forward to the show as well. I mean, it's a golden era, so looking forward to the discussion that's obviously going to unfold over the course of the next hour or so.
Well, this is right up your alley. You remember every kick and hand pass and every wind direction and blade of grass situation from this time. So if Dan's not on his game, you'll be certainly there to pick him up.
Yeah, for sure. But if you had the opportunity to read his book, he's been pretty comprehensive with that era, and it kind of brought a lot of memories back just reading each page. So pretty excited about it.
If you haven't seen our post previously throughout the day, we are fortunate enough as a special guest tonight to have author of Larrikins and Legends, Dan Eddy, joining us tonight. He's just setting out his webcam. He'll join us very shortly. But Dan Eddy, author of Legends and Larrikins, his book relating to our golden era, particularly of 79 to 82, and it certainly was a golden era. Many of us will remember it. Many of us are still longing for it to come back. But can't wait to hear what Dan's got to say about the book itself and some of the stories that he was able to get out of the players that he interviewed at that time.
Yeah, look, it's interesting because. As part of my business, I've brought on a wonderful person from the Carlton Football Club called Rose Zaraki. She's doing some wonderful work and came very, very highly regarded. But, she's in her 20s, and, that sort of era that she just didn't grow up with. She's grown up with the complete obverse and just hanging out, just waiting for that single solitary premiership. And, by the time I was her age, I'd seen, 5, 6 or something.
Yeah.
Good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining us. We've got Anthony Papa. G'day, Anthony. Thank you for joining us. Elise Clement. G'day, Elise. Thank you for joining us. Michael Howell. G'day, Michael. Patrick Duggan. Hey, mate. Thank you for joining us. Gina Harris is from Corowa. Thank you very much for joining us. Greg Sandow. G'day, Greg. Thank you very much. You've missed the couple of shows. Glad to have you back. Rob Galaccio. G'day, Rob. Thank you for joining us. We would love to hear from you, part of the show. And Adrian Hines. If you're just joining us, we are just waiting to bring on the line our special guest of the night, Dan Eddy, author of Larrikins and Legends, a book about Carlton's greatest era, pretty much, in 79 to 82. So we're looking forward to hearing from him a bit later in the show. Andrew, before we kick off, mate,
Yep.
It looks like we've got a start date for footy, June 11th. I suppose we've all been hanging out and not too far away.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting, and obviously the intrigue's going to be around who we play first. And my gut feel is they'll probably want to get as many blockbusters up and going initially. So I could see us playing Essendon first up. Just I guess to get the blood flowing again, and obviously Collingwood and Richmond are perceived as to kick it off. But I think Carlton, Essendon are right up there in terms of the interest level out there and obviously in the public. So, and just adds a little bit more, I guess, pizzazz to the restart.
I suppose that means they're not going to scrap the original round one and bring that back again, which is a bit disappointing for us. But as I said, good to have footy back in any format. And if you haven't heard, June 11th looks most likely. By all accounts, the Crows and Powell will come over here, or potentially come over here in a bit of a hub. As with the West Coast, and it'll happen here in Victoria. So it'll be great to have it back for sure. It's going to be really interesting. Let's talk about, I suppose, who our team for a start. We've got some fresh blood back. Eddie Betts is probably back, ready to go. We've got Harry Mackay that's potentially injury free now. So I think
Caleb Marchbank's probably in that mix as well.
Yeah. So in terms of a list strength, I could probably only think of Charlie Curnow that might be the only one that is probably.
And Matty Cruiser.
Yeah, Cruiser, of course. Sorry. Yep.
Yeah. And obviously Brody Kemp's probably still getting to be nursed through his first year. So, but our list should be quite fresh, but I guess that's across the board. All the lists will be fairly fresh at this stage. I guess the worry is the soft tissue injuries that could, I guess, crop up because of the lack of, I guess, continuity in their training, and I guess it really comes down to how they've been prepared leading up to this restart.
John, how do you think the sort of preparation will have to be? I think we've got the ability now just to train in groups of 10, so that's not going to be ideal, of course, but everyone's in the same position. First of all, mate, June 11th, are you looking forward to it coming back on board?
Yes, but it's kind of let's go for 2021 now. And I said that at the start of the season, and I still got into the Richmond game, but only wasn't fully invested. I wouldn't have thought. So it's going to be interesting the way ratings go and all that. I think the first few weeks will just absolutely pop in ratings, and the AFL and the broadcasters will get quite a bit of money back, but I think it might just really taper off after that.
So no cardboard cutouts, do you think, in the crowd?
No, what, sorry?
Hey?
What? No, what, sorry?
Cardboard cutouts in the crowd.
Oh, who knows? Who knows what they're doing? They're talking about doing digital sounds and all that, and I think that's disgusting. I just want to actually, and I sent them an email on this. I want them to have an option, and I'll pay for it, for them to stop the commentary, so we can actually listen to what's happening out on the ground.
Like a pure game, yeah.
Maybe we could do like a goggle box setup, a live goggle box, and just swap in people's lounge room of them commentating a game. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, it'd be bloody good. Yeah, go to each state supporter group. Be fantastic. I'm sure we could set that up.
I know if you tuned into me watching Carlton play, I'd probably have a couple of pizza boxes, a slab of beer. You'd have to bleep out a few certain languages, and at halftime I would have probably smashed my TV anyway. So that's my
yeah. So we're talking an R-rated show. That's fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, we've managed to get Dan on board. He's sorted out his technical issues. Obviously, he's good with a pen and paper, but maybe not so good with a PC. He's waiting in the green room, ready to go, which is fantastic. We'll bring him on in 1 second. Let's say hello to some other guests. Michael Howe. Michael reckons he likes you better, Johnny, when you're at the back on the deck drinking stubs, mate.
Mate, I'm with you. So do I. Just Melbourne and Tassie weather, isn't it? Yeah, there's a certain part of the year where you just got to go indoors, and I hate it.
Yeah. Patrick Duggan says, let the number one fan from each club in and let them cheer. That would be entertaining. It'd probably be a bit of a hard choice too, select the number one fan.
Yeah, it would be. There'd be a bit of a brawl on.
Yeah, there'd be a bit of a ball. Kevin Lang today. Kevin, thank you for joining us from Brisbane. Justin Lee, we should call a game. Well, that'd be good fun, wouldn't we? We could do that. Maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll just one of the games. We'll see what we can come up with in terms of a live call without streaming the game, because we don't want to breach any copyright. We're good boys in that respect. But maybe we'll do that, Johnny. How does that sound?
We did it once, didn't we? And
it was pretty shit. We tried to do it with radio, and it really didn't work.
Yeah, right. Yeah. The problem, Justin, that we're going to have is there's going to be a delay on the game, but then there's going to be a delay of us watching it, and then a delay of us broadcasting it. So, we can give it a go. It'll be a lot of fun. I think we did it for a quarter once a few years ago, and it was a lot of fun. We just enjoyed every single moment of it. So, yeah, love to do it again if the tech's right. If it's not going to stack up, then it's probably not worth doing. But, let's give it a crack.
Andrew, I'm sure you'll be available for special comments, mate.
Yeah, and obviously you need a statistician on these sort of occasions, so I can throw in all those little fun facts that you get in the normal call.
All right, let's do it. Carlton Essendon first round. We'll call it from Norton's. We'll do a live call and see if we can make a few friends.
Is that a fact? Have they called that? Have they?
No, that's my gut feel, John. I just thought they'd go for blockbusters to start us off.
Yeah.
We've called things before, so let's just call it now. Carlton Essendon round 2 straight up.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into the show. Like I said, we have a very special guest organised by John for us, and we very much appreciate him joining us tonight. If you've seen our post, you would have known who our guest is, and let's just try and bring him into the show now, and hopefully this works. 3, 2, 1. Dan Eddy, how are you coming in loud and clear?
Yeah, g'day fellas. How are you? Really sorry about that. It's a bit of a drama. It's worked all day. I can Skype people in Canada. I can do all that, but you blokes just down the road, I can't seem to get onto.
No, the most important thing is you're live and here now, mate, and hopefully you're wearing pants. That's the other main thing we're going to ask.
My secret's been revealed. Yeah, no, I did throw some on, but can you see me okay? It looks a bit foggy my end. I'm sorry.
Yeah, a little bit foggy, but that's okay. We've got you enough to be able to say good day.
Beautiful.
The first thing we need to come clean with, mate, and this is going against all of the grain of our show. We're exclusively biased Carlton show, and this is really hurts me to say, but you're an Essendon Scum supporter.
Hey, I'm a Carlton member, thanks very much. So I'm offended by that, but no, I am born and bred black and red, mate. But things change when you start to get into the career I've got into.
Yeah. So talk us through that. Talk us through how that went.
Yeah, no, I grew up. Everyone talks about Essendon and Collingwood hating each other, but there's no question that my biggest hatred was Carlton growing up. So I see a few will probably send me some hate mail now, but I got onto this story. I was interviewing David Parkin for something, and we got talking about this Carlton team, and which was completely off track from what we were doing. And he really sparked my interest in learning about the Carlton of the 70s and 80s. So I went and crunched the numbers and realised it was a pretty powerful team. So once I got interviewing and started to meet everyone at the club, and it changed my thinking on what I used to think about Carlton and David Parkin and all those guys. So very, very quickly I developed a special sort of affinity for the club, which I never thought I would have, and now I'm a member of the club. So come a long way.
We'll let you slide. Since you're a member, we'll let you slide, and we'll continue with the interview. That's fine.
Yes, you mate.
Thanks, boys.
So Dan, a prolific author, 11 books in 5 years. Obviously, that takes a fair bit of hard work and dedication to get that across the line.
Yeah, I think once you find what you're passionate about, it doesn't feel like work too much. Whatever industry you're in, if you suddenly realise that that's what you're meant to be doing in life, then it doesn't feel like work. So it was never planned that there'd be so many books churned out over a short period of time, and a master's and a PhD, which I'll mention in a little while. But so it's all sort of happened in a 5-6 year period, which certainly wasn't planned. But once you get talking to people and you find the stories that are interesting, it's amazing what you can achieve if you're desperate enough to get the story told.
Fantastic. We've got part of our show, Dan, and you'll see him in our little feed here, is our resident Carlton expert, Andrew Lake. He's the Encyclopedia Britannica of Carlton, we call him.
Carlton Google.
Yes, Carlton Google.
Nice to meet you, Dan.
Yeah, g'day, mate. Please don't pepper me with too many stats. I'm a bit nervous.
Oh, no.
No, go.
It's not a quiz. Yeah.
Andrew sat on the bench at the 99 prelim, was it, Andrew?
Yeah, I was doing a bit of scouting work back then for David Park, and so I had the privilege of sitting next to Barry Mitchell on that famous day, and he made the phone call, get Cooter in the middle. So it was, I got the scoop, I guess. So.
Well, if you had have hung around and not gone into the rooms after the game, if you had have waited half hour and looked up to the top deck, you would have seen one person left in the stand on his own crying. That was probably me. So.
Yeah. No, there was plenty of tears in the rooms afterwards, but obviously tears of joy. So. Yeah.
My favourite part of that whole day is it's probably one of the greatest days of my life. Sorry. But the last
it is though, isn't it? It's amazing. It's amazing.
The last memory I've got is at the Glenferrie Hotel with two girls drinking beer out of my belly button. And then I woke up and we lined up for tickets for 8 hours outside the Art Centre and watched all these Essendon supporters who thought they were absolute Monties for the year just pick up all their stuff and leave and go past us. And got the tickets, and the next day at work I won 2 tickets to the ground.
I remember walking into the ground for that prelim final, and walking in, and we'd obviously had a great year, Essendon, and I felt good, but then I looked towards the edges of the stand, and you could see Essendon fans already lining up before the game, and I just thought, this is not at all a good sign. What the hell are you doing? So it was one of those days where destiny was fate was awaiting us, and if anyone was going to knock us off, it was Carlton.
Yeah, so there were fans outside that Ticketmaster or Ticket Tech in the Art Centre who'd been there for a week, ever since the semi-final. They were there.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm glad we lost for them. that's it.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, we appreciate you coming on the show tonight. We're privileged to have Dan Eddy, the author of 11 books in 5 years, and something which we'll talk to him in particular about shortly, which is one of his books that particularly relate to Carlton, and a lot of Carlton a lot of Carlton supporters will know the book we're talking about, which is his Larrikins and Legends book, The Untold Story of Carlton's Greatest Era. And we're talking about 1979 to 1982, and it certainly was a golden era, and there's a lot of Blues fans hanging on for that time to come back again, I'm sure.
So you got recommended by Wow Jones, who we had on the show a couple of weeks ago. He said, have a chat to this bloke. He's a legend himself. And like I said, not sure if you caught this, but I thought it was a great idea given your knowledge of the period, but also when there's a bloke 6'8" and 2 axe handles across the shoulders, you kind of say yes.
Exactly. Gentle giant, though, isn't he?
What was your thoughts? He was fantastic on the show. I hope you got to see the show. But what was your thoughts of Wow Jones and talk us through the other characters that you met? I believe you met and interviewed about 45 out of the 52 or thereabouts of that period. Talk us through Wow Jones and the others that really spring to mind.
I will. And first of all, before we get too much hate going on for being an Essendon man, just look at what I've got on my wall there. That'd keep you all happy for sure.
Nice, yeah. Forgiven.
Wonderful.
Forgiven.
we know you're a Carlton man at heart now, so that's okay. You've seen a lot.
That's right, and I'll tell you some stuff about Jezza in a little bit. But in terms of the interviews, there was I went through the stats and realised there was 52 guys, I think it was, that had played at least one game between 79 and 82, and obviously we know the Jezzas and we know Wow Jones and that, but there's a lot of guys that only played one or two games. So I set out to try and interview all of them, and there was who did I miss out on? There was obviously Dennis Collins had sadly passed away, but aside from Dennis, everyone else was around. So there's a couple that just wouldn't answer their phones, but for the most part, I did really well. And there's one I missed out on, and his name's Bruce Dool. But and I should have recorded. I have got this recorded somewhere, but I can't work out where I've saved it. But what happened was I was speaking with Jess Southby, and I said, "Look, how can I speak to Bruce? How's that going to happen?" And he sort of laughed, and then he said, "I'll try. So don't hold your breath." And then Jeff rang me this day, and he said, "Bruce said, yep, he's happy to do it, and so he'll give you a call tomorrow." So you could imagine I was pretty excited. So I sat near the phone all day. I literally had the phone within arm's reach the entire day, and it got to. I was doing other work and it's just sitting there and I'm checking it every 5 seconds. And then my one toilet break for the day was at 5 o'clock. I thought I have to go to the loo. I'll go. And I came back and literally in that probably minute, there's a message on my phone. It's like he was outside the window and it said, "Oh, look, Daniel Bruce Dool here. I good luck with your project, but I've decided not to be involved." And I was so shattered, but I did put those words in the book, so it did get in there. So technically, I sort of spoke to Bruce, but not quite.
You must have missed our interview, which we did an interview with Bruce Dool back on April 1. You must have missed that. It was really comprehensive.
I'll have to check that one.
You have to check that.
Did you really? Fantastic.
He got me too, mate. He got me too.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, April 1, mate. April 1.
It's our April Fool's joke, but that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, but yeah, it was fantastic. Some of the guys that only played a couple of games, they were quite sort of shocked that I rung them, I think, and they were chuffed, and that was one of the rewarding parts, that these guys got to have their say as well. I'm just trying to flick through the book to jog my memory now, but the likes of who did I speak to? I got Ross Ditchburn over in WA, which was fantastic. I got
cheers to our WA fans.
Yes, and a Major Dutton. I spoke to the Major down in, I think he was in Tassie. I spoke to him on the phone.
Yeah.
Guys like that. Peter Francis was good. All those guys. No, they were really, really interesting, and each one just had a slightly different memory. That's why it was important to get the guys that couldn't break into the team that much, because they're probably watching on and taking in more of what was happening. So I was rapt I was able to get to so many, because they really brought the story to life.
Now, Ross Ditchburn was, if my memory serves me correct, and Andrew will pick this up here, but he was very highly rated and didn't quite make it.
Yeah, he was here for...
He came in 82 under the recommendation of Kenny Hunter, and then took a while to, I guess, get up with the tempo. Played an early game in 82, then kicked a bag full of goals in the reserves. Got his opportunity and it just clicked. He kicked 6 on return. Following week, he went out to Waverley, kicked 12. Leading up to the grand final, he played 12 games and kicked 61 goals. And what people forget is he got knocked out in the first quarter of the 82 grand final. And this is back when we only had 2 on the bench. So we were 1 short pretty early in that game. And the following year, he came back and played 83. had a hot and cold year. He kicked 30 goals in 15 games, and then his father got ill, and he went home to run the farm. He was a farmer by trade. It's a similar story, I guess, to Bazasto. Their fathers got ill, and they returned to Perth, probably obviously far too early. We went out and then obviously got Warren Ralph as a replacement in '84. But yeah, he played 28 games, but his first season was scintillating. And when you've got that sort of delivery coming up the field, you look at that mosquito fleet that I guess the football record from last weekend summarised. I mean, he was getting it lace out, and this is back when we didn't really have a key forward. We had Mark McClure and the mosquito fleet, and then all of a sudden Ross Ditchburn gets slotted in, and it just clicked for us. And so he's left his legacy. I mean, unfortunately, he probably won't even remember what happened in the '82 grand final because of the severe head knock he got. I mean, he got kneed in the head by Martello very early and was off the ground.
And he
was an enigma, and unfortunately, his last game was out at elimination final against the Bombers in '83, and next minute he's gone. It was kind of like, it was a very brief career, but obviously a memorable one.
And a number of players told me, including Parko, that off the field he was a really popular. He was only here a short time, but his role as a clubman was really significant. He really involved himself in the club socially and was actually one of the organisers of a lot of stuff during those couple of years he was here.
Yeah.
Dan, you mentioned David Parkin. Was he sort of the catalyst and the inspiration for doing this story, or is sort of something you'd had in the back of your mind to do, given it was such a great time and a great era, and what really was, in terms of a group of players, and not just 3 or 4 players like we've seen in probably recent times, but a whole group of really outstanding footballers.
Yeah, no, it was David. He referred to them as the forgotten champions when we were talking, and because we were talking about great teams from other eras, and I thought that's almost the title of the book. It was that good. So that's how I approached it. That people have overlooked this era as being on a par with some of the great eras, and why is that? And David was the one that really brought me to life. So he's the credit behind this story coming to life, and his memories and his even just turning up from Hawthorn, a club where they weren't heavy drinkers. A few of them were, but not to the belief that Carlton were in a sense. So he got a bit of a culture shock when he arrived, and so that was really interesting to get his insight into, and the players' insight into how comical they found that when he was trying to control their social life, and he wasn't having much luck.
It was great to hear Wow Jones about that too. He said that was, really the turning point, and that was, it was such a breath of fresh air, and it made the team stronger. It really became a team after he came on board.
Yeah, for sure. And David's wife Lynn Parkham was equally as significant off the field. Almost every player I interviewed just brought up Lynn out of the blue, So I interviewed Lynn for the book because I thought you probably had a fair bit to do with David's success during that period. And David was known for his very meticulous post-game paperwork that he'd provide for the players the next day. And Lynn told me she was the one that would be up the night before typing it all up for him as his non-paid secretary, I guess. So so it was really good to get her insight, because we don't want David taking all the credit.
Absolutely.
We'll get to a few questions later on in the show, and we'll certainly ask you about some specific sort of stories and anecdotes that might come to mind as we progress over the next hour. Hopefully, we've got you for an hour if we can. I know the clock's ticking, but did you sort of notice a common thread when you were interviewing these players, a theme amongst them that sort of stood out to you in terms of the people that they were and the success, or the reason behind their success?
Yeah, well, I think it's funny, and again, coming from the Essendon background, I guess. Perception outside the club was the perception outside the club was there was an arrogance to the club, and that was probably born out of your popular or your well-known presidents in George Harris and John Elliott as well. And so I went in probably not expecting the reception I received, and what was evident in every player was just the warmth and the embracing nature that they all actually had, even though you had some really unique characters. You know, you look at Wow Jones or you look at Jezza or Pearce or whoever, and everyone's very different in their personalities, Wayne Harms, all those guys, but every one of them was just really embracing, you know. It was fantastic. And so that's when it really, you got to me, I guess you could say, in that sense. That's when I really started to fall in love with that aspect of the club. And it was that off-field nature, as you guys would know. You've mentioned Norton's many times, and going down to Norton's, it wasn't to go down and get blind drunk and, make a fool of yourself. It was just to go there as a team and just commit to being part of the group. You could have your soft drink, or you could, just stay for one drink if you want and then go home. But as Ken Hunter told me, the first night he turned up and trained, he was absolutely buggered. He couldn't believe how hard it was. And then he goes to get in the car and go home, and McClure says, "Where are you going?" "No, you're coming down here." So he had to go down to Norton's, and he was a bit surprised that you were doing that on a Tuesday night after after training, but he quickly realised that was actually part of the really important aspect of the club that really helped to gel them as a group.
Yeah, there's a story about that with Kenny Hunter. Apparently, Trevor Keogh went up to him and said, "Oh, so what position do you play?" And he said, "Oh, half back." And he says, "Oh, we've got plenty of those." And it was kind of like a "you're welcome to the club" sort of scenario. So yeah, so he's made to feel very welcome very quickly. So, and
the man who, and again, this really surprised me, but not once I started to meet him and get to know him, but when you sort of looked at the media persona of Mark McClure and you thought, if anyone oozes Carlton arrogance, it seemed to be Mark. But it's funny, once you start talking to everyone and you meet Mark, you realise he's a very different person to his media persona. And almost to a player, including David Parkin, said the gel in amongst it all was Mark McClure. He was the one that actually would make you accountable on and off the field, and not just a good player, but was also very good off the ground in terms of keeping them together and looking out for them, and just making sure no one steps. You could be a Buzz Pizzusto and be a bit crazy and a bit out there, but even Buzz knew when to draw the line, and Mark was one of the real keys, I think, in creating that. Yeah,
for sure.
I found him. I met him once at the old Hilton Hotel, and he's very funny, very self-deprecating actually in his humour. Because I told him that I had the number 36 on my back, and he said, "Why?" That's true. Very true.
I've got a good story. On Mark. When he came down from Sydney, he was boarding next door to Vin Cottagio's family, just opposite the ground there, and I went and interviewed Vin and his mother, actually, an amazing lady with a memory that leaves me for dead, and I think she may be in her 90s now, but she's amazing memory. And anyway, they said, if you look out the back window there, you see the back brick fence there. Well, every night, Mark McClure would jump that fence and come and have spaghetti bolognese with us, and then he just loved the smells that come out of here. Yeah. He'd never had it before; he didn't know what it was. So, so Vinny and his mum can play an important role there too.
Good stuff. And he must have, by the look of him lately in the media, he's probably stuck to his pasta and spaghetti and meatballs.
Yeah, we might have to blame Vin's mum for that too, actually. Yeah. Not that I can talk, but yeah.
Dan, I've read the book, and it's a fantastic read, and it's obviously well researched, and you've really captured the essence of that time through those players that all of us as Carlton supporters really have grown up with those names. So yeah, a credit to you on the book. I haven't read any of your other stuff, but I better get down to the local library and do that. So was it a welcoming experience? Sort of what process did you go through, and what sort of time and effort went into sort of sitting down with some of these players?
Yeah, well, that's probably because I'm big on trying to interview as many people as I can involved with the club or the team that I'm writing about. That's probably the time-consuming part. I live down at Leongatha, lovely part of country Victoria, so it's a bit of a hike into the city all the time, but I try, and when you can do face-to-face interviews, it's always a benefit. So there's lots of trips to Melbourne, lots of phone calls, because a lot of guys live interstate as well. So, but guys like Wow Jones were fantastic in making sure the teammates spoke to me or giving me a phone number here and there, and just offering me little snippets of advice, which was fantastic. And Tony DeBolfo, obviously one of the great Carlton people, was a fantastic help for me too. So everyone was really, other than Bruce being a bit elusive on the phone, everyone else was really, really good, to be honest. So I found it certainly wasn't laborious at any point. It was an extremely enjoyable couple of years piecing it all together. But that was probably the time-consuming part, was trying to track everyone down, because not everyone was easily accessible, but we got there eventually. If
you actually answered the phone, Bruce probably would have opened up and had a chat to you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah.
That might be the next book, mate. The life and times of Bruce Dool.
He's fantastic. I wrote a chapter on Bruce. I thought, blow you, Bruce. You don't want to be talked about, but we all want to talk about you. So you're going in the book. So I did a whole chapter on him, and I just included everyone else's memories of him. So again, Wow and a couple of others had some funny stories to tell. There's one that Wow told. He's probably told it a million times, but they were in the huddle. He hadn't really. The way Wow tells it was that Bruce hadn't spoken to me at all, and we're in the huddle, 3/4 time, one game, and Bruce comes over and they're standing next to each other anyway, and he leans over and he says, "Wow," and Wow sort of rocks back and goes, "Heck, what's the great man's going to talk to me? Fantastic." "Yes, Bruce." And he says, "You're standing on my foot." So we were able to bring Bruce to life through others, and there were some funny stories. But you're right. At the ultimate, that would be a great biography if you could, even if Bruce doesn't want to be involved, to get everyone else who played on him. I mean, some of his opponents must hate him because they probably never got a kick. But so that would be one of the great books to write for sure.
A player that's or past player that's been in the news of late, thanks to Boxhead Kane Corns having his chirpy chirp 10 cents in, Alex Jezelenko. What can you share with us about your conversations with him?
Yeah, well, yeah, I did a PhD on Jezza, which might surprise a few, but I got his permission and his daughter's, his Kate and Sally's permission to delve into the family history. So I actually completed a PhD on the great man last year. It looks at his early life and his family background, and leading up to that famous mark, it sort of concludes at the mark. So now we've just got to convince him to let me write the whole book. But for now, we've got that at least on paper, and the mark itself is there's a lot more to it than just jumping up and catching it, isn't there? There's a lot going on around it. The occasion, the commentary. I got to know Mike Williamson in later years of his life. He used to have a farm down near where I am, and that connection him and Jezza share today, until Mike passed away, was a bond that was that mark was pretty significant in it all, you know. So there's a lot more to it, and I know Kane was, in a way, he was. I don't want to defend Kane, but in a way, I can see there's probably been higher marks, there's probably been more spectacular marks, but when you take everything into account, there's probably never been a more dramatic mark in a dramatic moment than Jezza's has there. So he probably didn't quite understand the full weight of the occasion, and so he got himself in a bit of trouble. I know one daughter of Jez's wasn't too happy about it, what she said. She defended Dad, but I'm pretty sure Jez would have just laughed and said move on.
Yeah, I mean, the guy, you know, I spent a lot of time working with the WWE, and I've gone a bit fuzzy here. I apologise to the viewers. I spent a lot of time working with the WWE, and I realised the benefit of having the heel, of having the bad boy. And I reckon Kane Corns is worth extra members to us in that he makes Carlton people realise what they've got, and mobilises them against him. And I've got to thank him. I reckon he does a great job in doing that. He realises he's no dummy. He realises that this competition needs a strong 4 or 5 Vic clubs again, and Carlton being one of those. And so, you know, he does his job. He does it. There's no way known. It's altruistic. You know, he does it to get his name in headlines. But you know, he plays that bad guy role, and we fall for it, and that's a great thing. It's a wonderful thing because it gets us passionate. It gets us saying this guy's an absolute whatever, and it makes us passionate. It gets us up off the couch, which Carlton supporters have been for a long, long time, off the couch and say, right, well, buy my membership, and you know what? We're going to stick it up in.
Yeah, good call. Good call. Well, whatever works, eh? And if it gives us a chance to actually look at more photos of Jez's mark or watch the vision again, then that's a bonus as well, isn't
it? Yeah. Look, it's like you know, the modern day equivalent is a Taylor Harris kick. You know, the dickheads who come after her, and it was just such a beautiful moment. It wasn't the best kick that'll ever happen, like the mark, Jez's mark. It wasn't, you know, the most inspirational thing, or wasn't meant to be the most inspirational thing. But you have a look at it now, and it's just so pure. That particular vision, that particular shot is just so pure, and it means so much more than the actual act. And so I absolutely love that kick, and I liken it to the mark in terms of what the stamp that has put on the game.
Yeah, and yeah, he's spot on. And I got to speak to I've found 8 different photographs of the mark, which no one's ever seen in sequence before, but I pieced them together in the PhD, and a couple aren't that clear, but there are a couple that haven't really been published before. And I spoke to 4 of the 8 photographers, and so it was amazing to get their insight into how significant the moment was for them as well, because 3 of them nearly missed it, and they're such iconic photos that they were a split second from missing it. They also said that if it was taken, as you guys know, in the last quarter, Jezza takes a ripper on the far flank over the southern side, and there's no photo of it. And the reason is, A, that no one thought to position themselves over there back then, really, and B, the lighting and the time of day, all that was too much for their equipment from where they were positioned at the time. So they were never. So if Jez's mark, they said, if Jez's mark was taken, you know, half an hour later on the far side, we wouldn't be talking about it because it wouldn't have been captured, you know, like it was. So part of that moment is the fact that, again, it's in the right spot at the right time. These guys are positioned, 3 of them are positioned up in the MCC stand, 3 of them, and they're sort of looking almost down on it from behind slightly, but they're all seated, obviously 1 seat apart. So 3 of the photos are click, 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 and so you get slightly different from a different perspective, but almost the same seats. So, and all 3 of them, they all nearly missed it. And then you have there's a front on, and there's one guy in the stand who just had his own portable camera. He just snapped it, and that hadn't been seen for decades. There's one that's never been seen, really, and that's one where he's just coming down from the mark. And he's sort of, and I can see why it's never been seen, because he obviously wasn't at the peak height. So the editor's obviously going, we're not putting that in, you missed the mark. But if you put it in sequence with the other 7, then you sort of see him go up and then down. And it's really interesting. It's into it. It's a real dramatic. I've spent a whole chapter on it in the PhD because I just thought this is a pretty amazing moment, and and we're still talking about it.
We are. Andrew, I mentioned before that you remember every blade of grass length and the wind direction and what the guy in the third row of the stand was smoking at the time. Let's hear from you in terms of some questions for Dan relating to your particular player or some memories of that particular golden year for us.
Yeah, I guess if you go back and have a look at that era, I mean, a lot of people probably don't realise there was 10 changes between the 1979 grand final team and the 1981 grand final team. So the list was turning over constantly. And as you said earlier, there was a lot of blokes who didn't get that taste of success. They would play 6 or 7 seasons at the Carlton club and be pushed on to, I guess, open the way for bigger recruits to come through. Did you find any of them have any, I guess, hard luck stories or feel any ill about missing out and becoming a premiership player?
Well, I don't know if any are really bitter or they weren't overly bitter, but there was the realisation that they were one of 15 mosquito fleets, so you can only fit so many in the team. There's one, and there's a couple that butted heads with coaches and they probably missed their opportunity. I'm just trying to find some names here while I'm talking, but Mark Buckley was one. His nickname was Snooze, and I think Parko said he's the only bloke he's seen fall asleep on the massage bench, so he was a pretty relaxed bloke. But him and his brother Stephen, they played a handful of games, but probably could have played more. Mark in particular, but butted heads, so he probably missed out. But then there's another one.
Yeah, he was a good Mark.
Yeah. There's one they say that could have been an absolute gun was Brendan Hartney. Played 12 games in 80. I'm not sure how long he was there. Maybe 81, 82. Played about.
He came right at the start of Parkin's tenure, and he was always like I guess you call him the 21st man, picked every week, sort of thing. So, to break into that back line would have been very hard back then. So
for sure, and and I just hear he said he won Carlton's reserves BNF 83 and 84. So he was you're right, 21st man, and then he goes back home to Sandhurst mid 80s, captain there. He wins 4 consecutive club BNFs for a total of 6. 7 McPherson medals, I think, which is the best player in the competition up there. So he was, they reckon he was just an absolute gun, but just there at the wrong time.
Yeah, and I guess a few of them, like Alan Mangles and Greg Towns, they were there in the final campaigns of, say, 75, 76, 78, where we fell short. And I guess the youth of the Sheldons, the Buckleys, Harms, Johnston comes along, it just pushed them all out the door, and they just moved on to other clubs. And I guess their careers at other clubs are almost forgotten because people see them as Carlton people, and none of them really, I guess, kicked on and made a big status at any other club. I mean, the latter half, like the Marcoux, McConville, Jones, etc., went to St Kilda, gave them solid service, but they're all remembered as Carlton people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think that you're right. The guys like Albie Mangles, Tony Pickett. I think there was a couple of those guys that you're right. You could sense they were sort of. There is that disappointment that they just couldn't hang on that extra couple of years, and then you're right, young blokes coming. Vin Katogia is another one. I mean, Vinny. He sort of deserved to be one of those premiership teams. Vinny.
Absolutely. I mean. Once Jezza took over in 78, Vin Katogio's career just skyrocketed for that season, and he probably became the most dynamic of the Mosquito fleet for a period of time. His 78 season he finished 4th in the best and fairest. 79, he started off really well, got a couple of niggles, and just lost his place at the wrong time and couldn't break back through into that grand final. I mean, you look back, and Rod Ashman was one of the greatest players Carlton have had, and even he had to sit and watch the 79 grand final because they weren't prepared to risk him because he had a hamstring problem. So
he's still dirty on that too.
Yeah.
He is. That's one that is still dirty. Yeah, I forgot that.
Yeah.
Dan,
Yeah. I mean, you look at the era, and there's only 8 of them have played in all 3 of them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
So there was a turnover of people coming and going, and blokes like Greg Wells comes in at the right time, fulfills a lifehood dream, wins a premiership. I mean, Val Perovic is plucked out of St Kilda's mediocrity, becomes a cult hero at Carlton. I mean, they were just right time, and young lads like Glascott, first season, walked into a premiership side. I mean, it was an extraordinary era.
And then you
who were the 8?
Who were the 8?
Yeah.
Well, there was. Yeah, Johnston was. We ended up playing in 4. He was the only one who survived to 87. There was Buckley, Sheldon, Harms,
Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, McClure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bear with me. There is another one.
Dan,
McConville played in all 3.
McConville and Marcoux. Yeah, McConville and Marcoux as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then you had. Yeah, sorry.
No, that's all right. I was just going to say, let me throw some names at you, and maybe you can just sort of share some tidbits from your time and discussions you had with them. We heard his name before. Interestingly, he was brought up by Wow last week, and it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on it. Val Perovic.
Yeah, I met. He was a tough one to tie down. Val. I think he still works a fair bit, or he just checks his phone too much and decides who he'll scream. But I eventually got him, and thanks to Wow probably. And he met me in you can guess which street he met me in.
Lygon.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think he paid for. Maybe I paid for it, but I don't think the owner made him pay for his coffee anyway, because that was obviously his local haunt when he was growing up for a coffee. So we met there, and he still had very fond memories of that street and that suburb. I think he lived not far from the ground when he joined the club. So he just really embraced everything about the club and having the multicultural background, and he fell in love with the place, and I don't think I would have wanted to get into a drinking session with him and Wow and McClure and a few others. I don't think I would have gone too well, but he became very loved, didn't he? And he was a bit like the Ange Christou with the Wolf when he kicked the ball. It was a bit like that with Val, wasn't it? He was one of those sort of cult.
Yeah.
No, Well mentioned that Val Perovic would put David Boone to shame if I would have a few drinks. Is there not?
I only found this out later, but is there not like a plaque or something somewhere?
They're at the Whale.
Oh,
the Whale's Inn. Yeah. Yeah, it was the night after they lost the 84 first semi against Collingwood, and Val Perovic ended up down there with. I think Wow Jones was part of that story as well. But there's a plaque that depicts how many beers he drank in that session. So yeah,
amazing. But he's a great bloke, Val, and that's the other thing. The other part of it is some of those guys that attracted not your typical white Australia footy fan. The migrant backgrounds from all the different areas. That's why I went and spoke with Finn Contogio's mum. So I just thought I'd really interested to hear, and she could just remember it as well. Just the different nationalities that you'd hear speaking at different parts of the ground throughout the game. Vinny Contogio could point out where the Greeks were and where his Italian family was. Like that was a really part of the flavour of a Carlton game.
Yeah.
And tell us about Jimmy Buckley. We know that Dylan was at Carlton for a little while, and that Jimmy's quite the character. How did you find chatting to him and his memories of that time?
Yeah, I think after Bruce, Jim would have been the hardest to tie down. He was one of the last blokes I interviewed. I was trying for a long time, but once I got to him, he was fantastic. He's in Fitzroy, I think, and I went and caught up, and he had some good stories for me. And I asked him about, we're talking about Wayne Johnston and him on the field and talking about some of the tough stuff that took place. And he said him and Jono would actually talk before the game and say, it was almost a competition between each other to see who could do the biggest hit to have the most influence on the day. So the Bash brothers almost, weren't they? So, but brilliant, dynamic players at the same time. But you just, I would have been petrified if I ran out onto the same ground as them.
A lot of those players always reference, Wayne Johnson when talking about that period of time and his influence over the side and his performances, and what he meant to Carlton and the team back then. A revered name in Carlton's history, of course. How did you go with the Dominator?
He was great, actually. He was very honest, very, very. There's two blokes I've met in footy who have just been supremely confident of their ability, and one was Jono and the other was Greg Williams. So there's a Carlton flavour there, but the Dominator, he was very honest. He reckons he should have won 3 Norm Smith medals, or at least 2. He's pretty certain of that, and he's probably not far off, to be honest. He probably does. He should have at least one. His role in 79 was fantastic when the team was struggling in the first quarter and a bit. He was one of the few, him and Pete Francis, I guess, that really kept you going. And then 82.
Yeah, 82. He kick-started it. Yeah.
Exactly. And in 87, I think he was good too. So he could have, he was a big game performer, wasn't he? Yet, on the Friday night before the 79 grand final, he was at a nightclub and he admitted that. I didn't drink though, he said. He said he didn't drink, so I'll take him on his word, but he came out and played pretty well the next day. But that was, but he was someone who got a late start, didn't he? Because he'd been rejected a couple of times by the club. And it was, again, like with Big Toggio, it was Jezza that really showed him that, he actually played on Jezza in a practice game and beat him, and that was probably his tick of approval after that. But that just showed that it was sort of his last chance. So, again, Jezza just showing that little bit of support was all he needed to flourish.
Well, look, he was actually keen to actually cross to Melbourne at that stage. And he thought that would be his chance to play regular VFL football. And Jezza said he's not going anywhere until I see him play. And obviously, Jezza, as you said, on the practice match, I said, I'll line up on him. And Jono apparently kicked 5 on him. So it was, and then he thought he's not going anywhere. So, yeah.
I don't know, has there ever been a more apt nickname than Wayne's? And I know it wasn't nicknamed for his on-ground performances, but I think it was more to do off the field. But his on-field was pretty much the same. So it was the most appropriate nickname I think we've ever had for someone.
Johnny,
he certainly embraced it.
Johnny, what's the play that springs to mind for you in that halcyon period?
I was a massive Brewstall fan, as everyone was. But you go back and look at it, and you look at what Jono did in those times. My old man, probably through the mid '80s, I would have asked him. My old man didn't speak much, but I said, who, if you had your team, who would you put in? And he said, Wayne Johnson, Dermot Brereton. They're the big game players. They're going to win your premiership.
Yep. And there's 2 grand finals, I think 86 and 87. The Jono Dipper clashes are legendary, aren't they? And that just summed up. He'd do anything to win, and we know what he did in 81 with down in defence with
Graham Allen.
Yeah, that's right. And he broke his jaw, and I think Allen still hates him for that, doesn't he? But but it was kill or be killed to win for the team. And grand final day, I mean, I would have loved to have seen him in the rooms pre-game and before a grand final. I mean, he must have been like a steaming bull, just roaring to run down the race,
A question here.
One of the best runners that I saw in that period was, you mentioned it before, Dan, was David Glascott, and his ability to use a ball at full tilt in those days was quite extraordinary. He always caught my eye as well. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, his link-up work at times was pretty important. some of the rounds too, wasn't he? And so he was critical to that. And you're right, he was a young bloke there at just the right time, and he must have been pinching himself. Being in
he wasn't sort of the grain of the the go in and have a fight type of thing, or go in physical. He was on the outside. He probably pretty much started outside run. And his ability to use it was just unbelievable. But he wasn't up for the rough stuff. He just he did his job, and he was fantastic at it.
And you needed that. I mean, you had blokes again. Vinny Katojo wasn't up for the rough. Either was probably Peter Francis, but they were the guys that provided the other aspect, like at Hawthorn with Dean Anderson and those guys that they let the other guys do the tough stuff, and they were the critical link-up men that you need in those big games.
Yeah, I think the Peter Francis stories really irks me a little bit because he was a beautiful footballer to watch, and their desperation to get Frank Marcazzani. Almost like they threw away a very talented footballer, and I think he would have been a one-player club man, and he loved the Carlton Footy Club, and we didn't see the best of him at Carlton, but it was a very strange time as a young bloke to see a premiership play kind of shipped off like that.
Yeah, for sure, and I know he was shattered by it, and he made most of what he could with it, but he was devastated, and he was playing really well, and being from Leongatha, he actually was very heavily involved later on with. He's only just retired, hasn't he, from Gippsland Power, and that's our local team. I guess my cousin played under him there, Rob Eddy, who had a few games at St Kilda. He played under him there, and he had such an influence on young footballers, didn't he? Boys and girls now. So he's been a significant person, and you're right. He probably would be an absolute all-time icon of Carlton if he'd stayed. He'd have probably 3 premierships, maybe 4, and he'd be loved in that. Whereas he probably gets forgotten, I guess, a little bit because he wasn't there for the longevity. Yeah. And sorry to butt in, but he's another one who absolutely credits Jezza. He says, I didn't think it was going to happen for me. And Jez had come to me and said, "Nah, you're going to do this. Stay. You're going to play well." So Jez's influence on some of those young blokes was enormous, really, wasn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, you look at that centre line of that premiership year, and it was Francis, Jezza in the centre, and Michael Young on the other wing. I mean, it doesn't get remembered, but I mean, all three. I mean, Young and Francis played significant roles on that day.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Youngie played a significant role off the field too. I think he was one of the leading lights off the field. He was the Adonis looking bloke, wasn't he? And he I didn't get
with the long hair and
But then the teammates speak fondly of him, but I think he enjoyed the off field life as well. But you're right, he was part of that. Because they only, in brackets, only won the one premiership, they probably do get forgotten because you had so much great.
Yeah. How did you find Wayne Harms? Because from an outsider looking in, it looked like he fell out of love with the game for a while after his career had finished. And I mean, as a kid, I mean, to me, he was the most dynamic teenager on the scene at the time. And if we had Rising Star Awards back then, he would have probably won one of those in a heartbeat. And he had so much influence over games as an 18-year-old, as a 19-year-old. It just seemed he became a little bit bitter towards the game after his career had finished.
Yeah, I know when Parko came in before the 81 season, he said, my first training session was down at Aberfeldy Park in Aberfeldy up there near the river, and he turns up and he looks over and he sees these blokes jumping over someone else, and they're doing their high jumps and they're running and they're doing some crazy acrobatic stuff, and it was Ken Sheldon, Wayne Harms, and a couple of others, and he had no idea that they were that athletic. And you look at Harmsy and you think, he was maybe he looked a bit podgy, or he's just a bit short and stumpy. Just didn't look athletic. But you look at some of the marks he took, and even his desperate dive, obviously in the grand final, those sort of things that probably visually didn't look that way, but he was as competitive as any player in that team, and probably as loved as well. But he's a bit like Jezza today, and John Nichols, who I've spoke with as well, and a few others that really disillusioned with how they see the game being played today. So I think they've really, I don't know, fallen out of love with footy, but they probably aren't as invested as some other past players are in that sense, which is sad because we'd love to see them around more. But but Harmsy was, you can imagine where we met. We met in a pub in near his home in the out near the airport somewhere out there, and so it was in his comfortable environment, and he had a few gaspers while we were chatting away and thing. But he's a character, and I love chatting to him. And as a kid, when you'd have the Friday night before the grand final, the marathon on Channel 7, and I just used to be in awe of watching that 79 grand final and watching Harmsy. Harmsy said to me, I didn't turn the game. I didn't deserve that medal. I didn't, I said, mate, I've watched it and studied it minute by minute, and your push up the ground, the momentum starts to swing. You have a shot at goal mid-second quarter, just starts to change things around a bit, and you might not have had 30 touches, but your impact in turning the momentum was enough to earn you that medal, mate. No?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were 5 goals down when that move was made, and it was kind of forced on him because, I mean, Jezza was having some injury concerns as well, and he was just getting – Kevin Morris was touching him up in the middle, so they had to do something, and I guess they'd pulled that trigger with Harms over the last couple of seasons anyway, so it wasn't, I guess, a huge surprise, but the fact he was able to adjust so quickly to the tempo and go bang, and I mean, you got to remember he was only 19 at that stage as well. I mean, it was just unheard of that a kid would be, making such an impact in the last game of September. And you got to remember, leading up to 79, Carlton's finals record was, I think, 1 win from the last 7 finals appearances. I mean, you touched about the wasted years in your book. I mean, 75, 76 were huge missed opportunities, and I'm really glad you touched on those seasons because pure talent-wise, I think they were the best sides in the comp, but they just couldn't go with North Melbourne, Hawthorn's ruggedness when it counted. And
I agree. And I think that's why when Jezza became coach, he just became quite brutal as a coach and really brutal as a coach because he knew they'd got through on talent, but not on enough. Not that they didn't work hard, but there probably wasn't the work ethic to the level of Kennedy's commandos at Hawthorn and that Barassi at North. So they needed to go to another level again. And you're right. I mean, that 76 1 point prelim loss, and 70. I mean, 73 is the lost grand final in a way. And then you look. I spoke with David Mackay. I spoke with David about it, and he said seriously, there's a 14, 15-year period where Carlton potentially could have played in every grand final. Like on paper, a million things have to go right, but in terms of just the talent they had at the club, and it was just more a mental thing, and maybe they were a bit shot after the Barassi years, I'm not sure, but it just took them, maybe they were a bit complacent. I'm not, there might have been a few factors, and you're right. I mean, Hawthorn and North were brilliant during that era, so that the timing probably wasn't great, but it's not that the talent dropped away, really, did it? You had Robbie Wall there, and you had Croswell was there for a little while. You had some great players. Yeah. So, it's an amazing era. If you grew up and you were young enough to enjoy the late 60s onwards, then you've had a pretty good life, haven't you?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
Johnny, if you could get in your DeLorean or your TARDIS, and you go back to one of these 3 grand finals, where would you go to?
I would go back to 99. It was so great.
93.
95. Could enjoy it. I'd love to go back to 72 and go right through, and like you say, see what actually happened with the club. And if you had a DeLorean, you'd like to say, right, guys, fix this. It didn't fucking work, but had so much there. Yeah. I would have loved to have seen 79. I think, that just solidified every reason why Collingwood hates us.
yeah, that's true.
And I just would have loved to have seen it.
Yeah,
I would have.
starting in 1970, they had the pain of that, and then they go through the end of the decade and they cop that, and then 81, and you're probably the reason that Tom Hafey gets sacked in the end at Collingwood. So,
actually, 70 is the one I'd go back to.
Yeah, I would have loved to have been. It's on a par with 72 for me. The two, and I'm hoping. Bit of breaking news, but I'm hoping to write a book on the 72 and 73 grand finals, from both perspectives, Richmond and Carlton. But that 72s are really not forgotten, but I guess 70 gets talked about more, so 72 probably gets next in line. But of the 79 to 82 era, 82, there's so I loved sitting down and studying that game and then getting all the insights, because that is, David Parkin, as they're about to go out, David Parkin just stops them in the race. And you guys would know this, but, they're fired up. They're ready to go out. They're about to walk down. And he just says, boys, and he turns and looks at Marku and he says, they're going to target you today and they're going to hit you. And when you go down, every one of you blokes turn around and hit your opponent. And that David regrets, he sort of says he regrets saying it now. He probably doesn't, because they won. But they went out, maybe first quarter, I think. Marku gets cleaned up, maybe on the outer side, or someone does, and there's a bit of a scuffle, and Parko looks down the field and he sees Mario Bortolotto standing next to David Cloak, and he looks over and Cloakey's suddenly sitting on his backside on the ground, and he can see he sort of Cloak's looking up at Bortolotto as if to say, what the hell was that for? And Mario just points up at his mate over there and says, that was for my little mate. And Parko said, I knew we were on when I saw that. And he actually joked. And Parko said to me, every year I buy him a dinner for that, Mario. And so I said to Mario, tell me about these dinners. And he said, dinners? He doesn't buy me a dinner every year. So I think Parko's using a bit of license there. But it was that 82 for me. And not to ramble on, but I studied it and I looked at it, and Maurice Rioli had a great game. He was fantastic, but he was only fantastic when Ken Hunter was off the ground. It was the only time he could start, and that's right. And Ken, I reckon he gets knocked out twice, and when he's on the ground, he is as good. I reckon he should have won the Norm Smith that day.
He was the most influential player after halftime, without a doubt. Yeah.
And that was the only time he went off twice, knocked out, and that's when Maurice Rioli actually had his best period of the game. So it was, Kenny went to a whole new level for me after watching that game. I couldn't believe his performance that day. Yeah,
Rioli gets a consolation goal at the end when the game's shot, and then all of a sudden he's a Norm Smith medalist, and you think, where's that come from? So, it was a surprise.
And we've got a couple of questions from our valued audience, and we appreciate sticking with us tonight. It's been really fantastic to have Dan Eddy, author of 11 sporting books, including the one we're talking about tonight on our Carlton show, Larrikins and Legends. John Flint, you've had a couple of good questions through tonight, and this one I'd like to sort of raise with you, Dan. He's looking for an insight into George Harris being ousted in 79. And the Jezza situation. Is there something you know about that you can shed some light on?
I mean, I called the chapter World War III in the book, because it was just, if I was around in those days when that happened, 30 years on, I still wouldn't be able to believe it. It was just, how could you go from having the success you just had in 79 to then suddenly, within a few weeks, your president and your most loved player maybe ever is standing up saying they're going to leave the club. I mean, it's unbelievable to think who won the flag. Yeah, imagine Richmond, Trent Cotchin and Peggy O'Neill said, "No, we're done. We're walking out after they've just achieved what they have." And it's impossible to imagine. So I really delved into it. So I was just fascinated to understand it. And Jezza gave me his side, and Jezza was just loyal. He said to me, Jezza could never picture that it was going to get to that level. He expected that they'd get voted back in, and they'd made their stand and it'd be okay. But he was loyal to George. He said, look, there's a lot of stuff that the public don't know, and the players and no one knew that if I had a problem throughout the year, I'd just say to George, look, this guy's done this, or this is happening, or marriage is broken up, can you talk? Whatever it was, and George would just say, forget it, I'll go and sort it, and it just got done. Like, George was that, as controversial as he was, he was so loyal to Jezza, and so that is why Jezza stood beside him, and Jezza's the sort of principled man that is never going to backstab a mate. So he was never going to suddenly pull out. He had many chances where he could have said, oh, look, this has probably gone far enough, I'm going to side with the club. But he said, no, he knew what was coming, but he stood it out anyway. And George never forgot what he did for him, because I think even George knew it towards the end. I think even George suggested, you don't have to do this, we don't want you to leave. So, but it just must have been an unbelievable, and it probably, in all honesty, it's probably cost the club a 4th premiership, hasn't it? Because and then we are talking about an all-time great team, aren't we, if you win 4 in a row. But that to get where they did after all that, and to still get within a couple of games of a grand final, it was a pretty amazing effort. So you think if Jezza was there, do they then probably win that one? Well, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Tony Prowse says, Dan, who's your number 1 Larrikin and legend?
I know he's listening in, so I have to say, Wow Jones.
No, I agree. Go something else.
But no, it would be.
We still haven't sent Wow his bottle of rosé up to him as yet. But it's now that lockdown's over, Wow, we can get out to the bottle shop. So we'll fill it up, right? I just don't want to be seen in a bottle shop buying rosé. It goes against everything I stand for in life.
That's an online.
He is. Excuse me. I called Wow on the phone, and I'd watched the games, and excuse me, guys. I watched the games, and he's such an imposing looking man, and I was really uncomfortable ringing him, and that's even just by the phone. And I could not have spoken to a nicer bloke. It was outstanding. I'd double booked another interview with Barassi, actually, so I had to cut it short, and then Barassi stood me up, so I could have kept talking to Wow for another hour, but we absolute. When you say a gentle giant, and he is, he's a fantastic man, and he just loves the club. He loved his teammates, still does. You would not have walked taller with him around, would you? Like just knowing he's on the field with you. I said in that 82 grand final at the first bounce, you look at the ruck contest, and I said in the book that Wow Jones looked like he could eat Mark Lee. He was that fired up and ready to just attack the contest, and he played probably his best game for the club in the biggest game of his life. So it's a pretty amazing. So I have a huge respect for Wow. Jezza, obviously we all idolise Jezza, so it was a huge honour to be able to sit down with him and talk about things, and so it was fantastic. But Ken Sheldon, amazing. We had a great chat with Ken, and all the guys were fantastic. Vinny Katogia. So I love the guys. I love that team. Mark McClure launched my book for me, and David Parkin's become a real sort of mentor in. I can go to David. I'm writing a book on a Hawthorn figure at the moment, Peter Crimmins, and David played with Peter, so I can always go to David with questions and advice. And he should be a legend of the AFL Hall of Fame. I'm not sure why he's not, to be honest, but his contribution, you could probably talk to everyone in the media and they've all been influenced by him in some way. And then you could talk to a million footballers and they've been, I know local coach down here, Bo Vernon, who hurt himself in a football accident. He's in a wheelchair. David's a massive mentor to him. He's a very successful coach down here, Bo, and David's been huge. So his influence is unbelievable. So I really feel privileged to have been taken into his embrace in terms of his knowledge of and his stories. Most of them are true, I think. So he has some great stories on all the guys. So hard to pick a favourite. Wow's probably become my closest mate out of the team, I guess. And just a great bunch.
And it was certainly fantastic talking to Al last week. We probably could have spoken all night. He's very open with his conversation, and top guy.
If I can just butt in for a sec too, I know his partner Anna's listening as well, and I sent her a copy of the book last week, and so they may be about to split up because now she's about to learn the real stories about him. I told her there's a fictional WoW character in there, but she might realise it's not fictional, and so good luck with that WoW. I hope she's sticking around, but yeah.
Oh, just one of many breakdowns of marriages in this lockdown period.
No, that's true. Yeah. You know, it's funny. You look back at David Parker, and I joke with David that when he was at Hawthorn, I said, you're known as the family club, and this team from '71 won the premiership, and there's 3 of you still married. Like it just, like it's fun, and you could do that with most teams. It's just funny how life works out, But when they're all there at the club, I mean, the women involved at Carlton during the Lynn Park and David Parkin era, that become another significant part, the back support, because for years, for decades, the women were sort of left out in the car park while the boys had a beer and a smoke and had a chat. And it wasn't until the late 60s through the 70s that started to change. And Lynn Parkin was significant in that. And it became an important aspect of you guys keeping the likes of, who did we say from WA before? Keeping the likes of, who did we get? The goal kicker, who I've just forgotten his name. Spurn, yeah, guys like that they move over here and their wives have to move over here too, or their young girlfriends at the time, and it isn't, the embracing of the women become huge in terms of keeping these guys at the club. So huge roles. So yeah, amazing club, amazing group of people.
We might have to wrap up shortly, Dan. I could keep talking all night. I don't know if you can. I don't know how much we've paid you for tonight. Johnny sorted that out, and we're paid by the hour. I hope we'll have to round it off. But for anyone that didn't see, we're going to give away a copy of Dan's book to one of our guests on tonight, and that'll be fantastic to do that. We might even see if we can get Dan to sign it. We'll also let you know later on the show where you can get a copy of Dan's book plus all of his other work. So Dan will share that with us a bit later. So yeah, if you've got any other questions, send them in now.
Yep.
One last one from me before Johnny and Andrew, you can ask a few as well. Mike Fitzpatrick, I don't know about as a kid growing up, I was just sort of wowed by him. He was sort of one of my top favourite players. He seemed to just be there all the time, reliable, doing his thing. Obviously a big figure in Carlton, a big figure in, going through to the AFL. Could you share some insight on Mike?
Yes, I can. Sorry, guys, I've got a bit of, I won't say it's coronavirus, but it's something anyway. I've had a bit of a cough for a week or so. I'm really sorry. But, yeah, you talk about going to interview people and the intimidation factor of interviewing people. When you're a bloke who just went to public school in the country and you grew up kicking balls between trees on a dairy farm, and then you have to go to the top end of Collins Street and interview Mike Fitzpatrick, the Rhodes Scholar, you sort of feel a little bit out of place, and when you've looked at your map, and it's worse when you've looked at your maps wrong and you're at the other end of Collins Street on time, and then they ring and say, "Where are you?" And I say, "I'm here," and they said, "No, you're at the wrong end." So I had to be half hour late. So you can imagine how extra nervous I was when I knocked on Fitzy's office door, but he was fantastic. Actually, he told a lot of jokes that I still haven't got the punchline to, and he cracked up laughing. So obviously they were very clever jokes, but I was way below the intellect for what he was saying. And that's one of the real interesting things for him to be captain and to have the educational background that he had, and then you have Mark McClure, who wasn't strongly educated when he turned up, and Wow had a tough background as well, and lots of other guys did, and then you have this mix, and you put the captain who's the smartest bloke in the club. I mean, the connection still has to be there, and the connection for Mike was on the field because he was just such a inspiring leader when the chips were down. I mean, we talk about blokes that could have won Norm Smith medals. Mike should probably have won as well. It may be 81 or
81. Yeah.
I mean, he was. Yeah, that's right. When you were down, it's sort of struggling towards three-quarter time, and the game's still in the balance. I mean, he was as good as anyone in that last quarter, and so he probably, because he wasn't the loudest or the easily relatable to sort of guy, he probably, as a leader, gets forgotten when you talk about Luke Hodge or Michael Voss or Stephen Kernahan. But
and he played that final series with a broken hand as well. So
yeah, so I've got an admiration for him, but it was certainly a different interview than interviewing Harmsy or someone like that. That's for sure.
Mm.
Johnny, your final thoughts and questions to Dan, and you've done a fantastic job getting our guest on tonight.
I just want to know the funniest story you got out of it.
That would be.
It's over 9 o'clock now, so you can. There's no.
I hope Anna up in Sydney's turned the microphone off and she hasn't read the entire book because I saved it till the end. There's two, but this one I had to save till the end. We know the great Wow Jones. I'll just read it to you if you like. So this is the last couple of paragraphs of the book. Finally, for those wondering how Wow Jones earned his nickname, here is his story. After one of my first games at Carlton, we went out as a group and I was chatting with George Harris's wife. She was saying, I saw you play today. Do you have any more tattoos? And he said, yes, I do. I've got one on my back. As a matter of fact, a mate of mine has got tattoos on lower parts of his body. And she said, really? And was quite inquisitive. So I said, yeah, he has a W on either bum cheek. And when he bends over, he goes, wow. And and she went quite bright and blushed a bit, and then it just happened that Curly Austin was walking past when he heard the story. So after that, all night he walked past Wow saying, every time he walked past Warren, he was saying, wow, wow. So it stuck from that. Now, I never asked Warren to show whether he was the guy who actually had the tattoo. Anna might be able to answer that, but so that's the myth behind the story, and Wow's happy to let it go on forever. I don't know if he'll ever prove it to us or not, but maybe I should have asked one of his teammates who showered with him, probably whether it was him. But that was one of the greats. The way he told it was very funny, And then there's one more. One of the privileges, I guess, of being at Carlton is if you win a premiership, you nick on up to the lodge in Canberra and hang out with the Prime Minister for your post-game celebration. So the boys in 81. They go up to the lodge. Malcolm Fraser invites them up and they take their girlfriends up. Alex Marcou's known a girl for about 24 hours and her name's Fabulous. I don't even know if he ever learned her real name, but her name's Fabulous. And she went up with them and she went up with them.
Bruce still calling.
We'll get there. So yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it might be Bruce actually. I've got to go. And he, so he went up and he's up there, and she's the first to get drunk. So as you can imagine, it's pretty embarrassing. They go up the stairs, or they come down the stairs. She trips and falls over and snaps her ankle. So I don't even know if he knows her real name, but suddenly his dates snap their ankle in the lodge. Sorry, boys, I'm very popular tonight. And she, so what happens next is Tammy Fraser, the wife of Malcolm, takes him, helps get her into, I think they get an ambulance or something, and she takes him to Canberra Hospital, and she comes back, and the next day they get home. It was just an up and back flight, and they get home the next day, and Alex received a phone call the next day at home, and it was Tammy. Can I swear on this or not? Maybe not.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Well, so Tammy, the wife of the Prime Minister, rings. Alex answers the phone. Hello. Oh, hi, Alex. This is Tammy Fraser. How's Fabulous's ankle? And Alex, in only he can, says, "Who the F is this?" And he went crazy at her and went to hang up, and she said, "Hang on, it really is Tammy Fraser here from the lodge." And she just rang to ask how fabulous his ankle was. So in Alex's special way, I said, "Oh shit, sorry, Tammy, I didn't realise that." And he retold that like 20 years later at a reunion, and Tammy and Malcolm were there, and they cracked up laughing. So it was a really funny story. And so the fabulous story is one of the most famous. I think you can actually watch him tell it on YouTube. So go on there and have a look. But it's hard to believe that these rough and tough blokes from down Princess Parkway could be hanging out at the lodge. And when they left the lodge, if you had have just tapped Harmsy's pants, you might have found a golf club stuck down his pants from the Prime Minister's special set. Apparently, Harmsy might have pocketed one of them. And the second year, they get invited up again, but the boys say that when they got there, it was all paper plates and throwaway knives and forks.
It's gold. Malcolm Fraser probably would have fitted in really well with the boys. I think from memory, didn't he lose his pants and his memory in America at one stage on a bender?
Oh, I didn't. Oh, yeah. That rings a bell. Yeah. That's the amazing thing with the Carlton dressing room is, Wow says he'd just say, "G'day, Mel, how you going?" And then you had Robert Menzies obviously had the car at the ground, and so you had him in the dressing room. Jezza probably gets to Carlton partly because of Don Chip, the based up in Canberra. I can't think what his role was at the time, but Don Chip. But then you also had was it the uncle of the Moran boys? He was the doorman.
Leo Brooks.
Yeah,
Leo Brooks.
Yeah, he's the doorman. So the boys say that the Moran boys,
crew.
The Moran boys sort of grew up on the Carlton dressing room floor, So it's the mixture of all different shapes and sizes and backgrounds was very unique, I think, to the Carlton at that time.
What I really liked when we were talking to Wow is that that Carlton crew they were very respectful. They were very they were just like regular blokes and all that. And it wasn't until later that sort of, oh shit,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, when they started to grow up a bit, they started to think, hell, what have we done here? Yeah, so I just would have loved to have been. I'm envious of everyone who, like Tony DeBolfo, who really got to be around the club during those years, and to grow up in the inner sanctum around that period must have just been. And even the Knicks nightclub, or I think it got renamed Jez's Joint when he was coach, but in Percy's Place or something like it. But just in the Heatley stand there, you had that room at the top. Was there a nightclub at the top or something? It was something like that anyway. And so that was where the players would go and hang out, and the media would flock there. It must have just been an amazing. And I also spoke with one of the Bluebirds. Jody Greenwood was one of the your famous dancers, So there's a chapter on Jody in here, and again, that's another part of the club that just brought a bit of glamour, and that was a George Harris idea, copying the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know if you can see that, but there's Jody.
Very nice.
So and she still has all the uniform they wore, and she can remember it was her auntie that actually devised the dance moves and all that. So the choreographer. So it was. So I got that take as well. And it's really, again, something that was unique to Carlton. It was just what a place to be at that time. Amazing.
Yeah.
100%. And hopefully we will be heading back to some of those glory days, and maybe in 2030 you'll be writing the next Carlton dynasty book, Carlton 21 to 2030, the dynasty. That sounds like a good book.
Be fantastic. It would be. It would be fantastic. I'd love to. I mean, I absolutely adore Patrick Cripps and the way he goes about it. And I mean, he's your central figure straight away, isn't he? And if they can get Curnow and those guys up and going, I mean, anything's possible. But it'll happen again. It turns. It always turns. I mean, Essendon's no better at the moment, so it's the same sort of thing, But it will turn.
That's the next book idea I've got for you. Will Essendon ever win a final?
Yeah, cheers. It could be a two-part book. We could sort of do a Carlton Essendon theme the whole way through, really, couldn't we? But that's the thing. It will turn, and I think the fact we've been blessed for so long with so much success that you almost do take it for granted. I know the Hawthorn guys in the 80s, and I mean, you just got used to being in the grand final every year, that sort of environment, and we don't appreciate the Melbournes and the St Kildas and the Bulldogs that hardly had any success. We were very, very lucky for a very long time.
The race to 17, that 17th premiership between us and your mob will be very, very hard fought, and it's really, you almost forget that we hate Essendon because of obviously the two clubs being up and down over the last few years, but it's still there. It's still there. It's
still the one game each year. I mean, for Essendon, you love to win Anzac Day and that, but there's the one game each year that probably gives me more nerves than anything is the Carlton game, and that's a good thing because that's been going. I mean, you can look in this book. You can look in this book, and you remember there's the famous Neil Danaher game. I know Essendon win it, but I mean the drama around that 1981 game.
Oh yeah, the time wasting.
Imagine being in the crowd that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So who do you go for? Essendon Carlton game. Go to your head.
He's Essendon.
Yeah, well, yeah, I am. But
good night.
I will definitely be cheering if Carlton get back into the finals. I'll definitely be cheering for them because we want successful teams like Essendon and Carlton there. You want those teams up and about because we know what the supporter base is like and we know what the histories are like, and we can retell the history stories when we're starting to have some new success, and you can really embrace it. And I think that actually one good thing about the Blues, whenever I've been at the club for interviews or just catching up in the cafe or something, that there's a presence of past players still love floating in there. Like you'll come across a Rod Austin or you'll come across whoever it might be, they'll float in. Like there's still even though the visual image of the ground has probably changed a bit and things are a bit different than they were. Some clubs don't have that embracing nature, whereas Carlton, I think they have one of probably the best. Essendon and Carlton, I reckon, are the best two past player, or Hawthorn as well. So those three are probably the best three run past player setups, where they really do try and embrace whether you play one game or 300. They're really great at doing that. And for Carlton, it's guys like David Rees-Jones and Jeff Southby and guys like that really do run a great fit there, and that for you, me, all the Carlton fans, we love to see the old blokes come back and be around the club, whether they, again, played 10 games or won 6 flags. You want to see them around. So I reckon Carlton do it as good as any.
Dan, it's been fantastic to have you. As we've said with a couple of our guests, there's so much to talk about. We could have had 45 shows and still wouldn't have touched the surface on some of the things you would have spoken about and heard about. But I implore everyone to buy your book as a Carlton supporter. There's no better read if you're interested in that era.
Yeah.
What are you working on at the moment, mate?
Yeah, it's just happened that it's all floated towards Hawthorn of late. But Peter Crimmon's biography is coming out almost finished, so it should be out in October, which very inspiring story, Crimo. And actually Rod Ashman credits Crimo early in his career. Rod, he was sort of on the bench and he wasn't feeling like he was going to make it. And Crimo sort of sidled up to him after a game and really gave him some words of advice, and it sort of gave him that pat on the back that he needed to just go to another level. So Crimo had an impact on players from all clubs. So it was really David Mackay toured with him. They went over did the Carlton be the All-Stars after the 72 flag. They played overseas, and Crimo was in the All-Stars team, so they all sort of got to know each other there. So it's really it's a sad but inspiring story, I think. And then Hudson probably next year as well, hopefully come out next year, Huddo's stories. So the few, I just love telling stories about individuals or teams, and this Carlton team, I mean, I just love this Carlton team. I'd love to do books on this sort of thing all the time, because it's such a great, and that's why I'm keen to do a book on the 72, 73, because I've got to interview Nichols for this book actually, and obviously Jezza and Peirce, and so to sit down with them again and go over those games would be fascinating, wouldn't it? So
Yeah.
hopefully I'm up for doing as many Carlton books as possible. So the club embraced me really well, and so throw your stories at me, guys, and I'll try and get them through to my editor and get the permission to write them.
I'm sure Andrew will have a few inside stories that he could share with you, and some stuff that he'd have some ideas on. So I'm sure that that'll be good. We'll try and connect you guys. Dan, I know we can get your book at the Carlton shop at Icon Park, because that's where I got mine. And where else are you sold?
Yeah, it's pretty cool when I've got a 3-year-old son now. It's pretty cool when we walk into bookshops and he points out Dad's book on the shelves there, and he always points up at Jezza with the big mo on the wall there. So it's cool when he does that. So you can get them in. Hopefully they've still got them on the shelves in Dimmicks and Reddings in Carlton there, and all the main ones. You can still get them online, or you can just contact me directly. You can go through Slattery Media's website, or you can come to me at daneddybooks.com. You can check out all my books there, which is great. But and happy to sign one, or convince Wow or someone to sign one for you and get it to you. So happy to accommodate, even in these weird times where we're still not quite meant to leave home and do much, but we'll still get the books to you somehow.
Well, if it's Carlton Essendon round 2, like we're predicting, maybe we can we might catch up for a sneaky beer somewhere, and where there's 10 people.
Yeah, I don't know. We sneak into Norton's, will they open the back door for us? So I'm not sure.
We'll work. And we'll put up a link on our page for everyone that's watching and everyone that watches the show later on, to where you can get the book as well. And so yeah, we'll do that for sure.
Awesome. And just one more to finish, guys. David Parkin said to me that Mark McClure said, David said to us, I saw you blokes drinking at the pub the other night at Norton's there. You're not to go there again. And Mark said, fine, we won't. So they went to another pub in the area. So that was their way of getting around the Carlton. Because Parko would drive past the window and they'd just wave at him, and then they'd go to the next pub. And so I have some funny memories of the stories they told about Norton's and the pubs around Princess Park there.
Well, that'll teach him to be a bit more. Teach Parko to be a bit more specific.
That's right. Yeah.
Tony Prowse, we're going to give you a copy of Dan's book. So send us a message through our messenger page, and we will get in touch with you and organise a book to be sent out to you. So I appreciate you and your interest, and everyone else who's watched the show tonight and who will watch the show post tonight as well. So yeah, really appreciate our audience tuning in, of course, as always.
Thank you, everyone.
It's been a privilege, Dan. Thanks so much.
I really appreciate it. Thanks, Wow, for suggesting me to come on. I'll be tuning in every week from now on. Fascinating stuff. So keep bringing out get some of those past players on fascinating interviews.
Yeah, no, look, we're hoping to do that, get a few past ones. We want to try and our next target is David Rees-Jones, so it'd be nice to get Big Reesy on. It'd be good to have a chat too. I
wrote a book on the Norm Smith medalists a couple of years ago. Yeah, and I interviewed David and Greg Williams, and who else has won one for Carlton? That might be it, is it?
Harms.
And Harmsy as well, yeah. So fascinating, David. He says, if I didn't win the Norm Smith medal, I'd be the dickhead that got suspended so many times. But he was more than that. He was a fantastic player, and he's a ripper bloke, David. So that'll be fascinating to listen to. For sure.
I used to go to his Canada hotel all the time.
I interviewed him at Mill Hannah's Cafe. Mill had the cafe there in Fitzroy Street, was it, or somewhere?
Yeah.
Still.
I don't think Dave paid for a coffee there, so I think Mill might have looked after him. But that was pretty cool to hang out with a couple of Carlton blokes there and just have a latte.
Yeah. Good spot, the Fitz. I don't think Mel's doing that anymore. It was a good spot for lunch. Anyway, we'll let you go. Again, thank you very much for coming on and sharing your time. Very much appreciated. I'll as I said, we'll put your link up, and for those interested, could have a look at this work and other work you've done. And best of luck for all your stuff coming up for the future.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, Peter Hudson book straight to my mum for Christmas.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, the Peter Crimmins book's in my must-get ones as well.
All right. Well, October, I'll make sure you keep an eye on the Facebook, and I'll let you know when we have a launch, when we're allowed to congregate in October, hopefully.
Magnificent.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. Have a good night.
Cheers, guys.
All right. Thank you.
Johnny, well done on that. Fantastic effort to get in touch with Dan and make that happen. A1 to you.
Yeah, cheers, mate. What I love is him and Wow were the same. It was like, how are we going to fill out an hour? It's like an hour and a half. So he was a lot better than he was a lot better than I thought he'd be. He was fantastic.
Yeah. No, great night.
My sister's an Essendon supporter, and I think he's just gone one up on her. So, yeah, no, fantastic. It's that was our golden era, wasn't it? Those 3 premierships. I know we won a couple after that, but that side there. There's talk about the Hawthorn sides and the Geelong sides and the Brisbane sides, but in terms of the amount of superstars across every line, there was just a name on every line. Try and remember the team, the whole Geelong team or the whole Hawthorn team or the whole Brisbane team. Certainly some superstar players. Maybe the Brisbane one I can think of probably all their names, but the names within those teams and the era, I suppose, made it all that more intriguing.
I think it's spread over 2 decades is the only reason. And there was 80 in the middle.
Yeah.
Were they
it was almost like there was Jez's team, and then within 18 months it was Parkin's team, and the changes were significant.
Very good, guys. All right, it's 9:30. That's probably one of the longest shows we've done. Hopefully we're actually still on air, because I don't know how much credit we've got on this program, but so hopefully we're actually still on air. Tomorrow looks like we're on air. Tomorrow looks like the announcement of when footy returns. We're all hanging out for that. 10 people at Norton, so we might just have a drink there and just 10 people in at a time and revolve them through after they've had a couple of pints. Yeah, we've lost money. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, John. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Again, thanks to Dan, and we'll be back in touch when our next show is. And love to hear your thoughts on the show tonight. Send us a comment, send us some criticism. We don't mind that either. Give us a shout and a like on Twitter and Instagram. Blue Horizons is your other go-to group to get onto. And let's hope that footy's back, and hopefully everyone's well. And we'll see you very soon.
Good evening.
Good night.
Good night, lads.
Thanks, guys.